Hi, my name's Jerry Reynolds. I'm the host of the nationally syndicated Car Pro radio show. I have a radio show every Saturday, heard all over the country. Here locally in Dallas Fort Worth, you can catch me on WBAP every Saturday morning from 9 to 11, and then again in the afternoon on KRLD 1080. And what I do is I give people straight talking, honest answers about everything automotive. Let me give you just a little bit of background. Started in the car business washing cars when I was 15 years old at a dealership here in Dallas, Texas. Yes, I'm a native Dallas Texan. I think I may be the last one, but I am one. And I worked my way up to general manager. And then by the time I was 29 years old, I had my very first dealership in Irving, Texas. And then I've had several since then. In 1996, I bought a Ford dealership in Garland, Texas, that ended up being the number one Ford store in America for at least 1 month, but we were number one in Texas for over 7 straight years. So we sold a lot of cars. And then I expanded and had Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram in Dallas. I had Lincoln Mercury Mazda in Dallas. And I had a Ford dealership in Oklahoma City. But in 2006, I decided to sell them off, and I was still fairly young. I was still, probably a little too young to retire, and I didn't play golf. So I had started this radio show in 2001 when I had dealerships. And the reason I started it was I saw a need for people who needed to understand the auto industry. I've always said car dealers make a lot of things secretive and they just don't need to be. So I felt this thirst for people to understand the car business. And I think unless you'd been in a position like mine, owning dealerships, it would be very difficult to explain it to anybody. So that's what I decided to do. I set out in '01, was supposed to go on the air, in fact, the week of September 11th, 2001. And of course, the tragedy happened in New York, and I put the decision off for 2 weeks. It was just an experiment. I just thought, I wonder if people would listen. I wonder if they would call me and ask me questions. And went on the air on a really lousy radio station in Dallas. At that time, it was Fox Sports 1190. And boy, it had a really bad signal, and it wasn't a very good station. And I was a little bit afraid to do this on my own, so I solicited the help of a name you'll probably recognize, Kevin McCarthy. Kevin had his own radio show for many years on KLIF 1190 and then 570. So we went on the air the end of September 2001, tested it. People loved it. The phones rang. We couldn't keep up with them. And they really appreciated somebody that would tell them the truth, no matter what, about the automobile business. And so thus the Car Pro Show was born. Actually, we called ourselves the Car Guy Show for the first 8 or 10 years until I found out it was an infringement on somebody that had a patent on that. So we changed to Car Pro, and that's where we've been ever since. Just celebrated our 19th year on the air, beginning our 20th broadcast year right here in Dallas Fort Worth. It became so popular here in Dallas after we moved to WBAP 820 AM in 2002 that other cities started to say, hey, would you like to come to our town and do your show? First one up was Houston, and then it took off from there. Austin, San Antonio, Lubbock, Texas, Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Francisco, Detroit, Cleveland, and the list goes on and on. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to do. I still do the Dallas show on WBAP locally. Only Dallas, that's it. And then as soon as I get through with that, I do the national show where all the other markets join in and call me at the same time. So I do 5 straight hours of answering questions on Saturdays, but we do it in a very entertaining fashion, and I think that's a really, really important piece of the pie. And no matter what, I tell people the truth. We've got a website if you want to check it out. It's carprousa.com. I drive about 100 cars a year, and I review and video with at least half of those, sometimes more than half of those. I've got two other car reviewers that work for me, and they also review cars. It's quite the production. I never saw it growing this big, but it did, and here we are, and I'm glad. Um, I'm happy to be a part of the Empowering Seniors program. I think it's very important. And I talk to a lot of senior citizens, especially on the WBAP show, where that audience skews a little bit more mature. So I love helping senior citizens. It makes me feel good, and I love talking to people anyway. And they're some of the nicest that are out there. At my website, carprousa.com, I've got a list of dealerships that I recommend and I send my listeners to, and they get special pricing and special treatment. The premier show sponsor, first sponsor I ever had in Dallas Fort Worth, was the Five Star Ford family of dealerships. And that is owned by Sam and Tony Pack, and they're dear friends of mine. They've been part of my show now for 15 years. And I know they're one of the sponsors of Empowering Seniors. Great people to do business with, by the way. 4 locations, one in Carrollton, one in North Richland Hills, one in Louisville, and they just built a beautiful new place in Dallas over on George Bush Turnpike. So with that, I want to give you some tips for buying cars. Let's start with that, because every Saturday I hear from senior citizens who are thinking about making a change from a car to an SUV. And there's a lot of reasons why seniors love SUVs. They're very, very popular, but let me tell you just a few of them that can really make your life easier, okay? First is getting in and out of the car. With a lot of cars, they sit low to the ground, and you find yourself sort of falling into them and then climbing out. And that can be very hard on your legs and your back, whereas an SUV sets up a little bit higher and you can sort of slide in and slide out of it. The entrance and exit of an SUV is so much better than it is for a car. The other thing people love, especially seniors, is the visibility. You've got glass all the way around you, and because you're sitting up higher, you can see down that road a lot further, which is very helpful. In case something happens in front of you, there's a wreck or an animal runs out in front of you or whatever, a kid runs out in front of you, you can see further down the road, and that's great. And then the last reason that I think seniors in particular like SUVs is getting things in and out of them. If you've got a sedan, you know when you walk up to it with a heavy bag of groceries, you've got to set that down into the trunk. And then when you get where you're going, you've got to bend over, reach out, and pull it up. And sometimes that's hard on your back. And I've had my share of back problems, trust me. So an SUV, because it sets up higher and the load floor is level, for most people it's waist high or maybe a little bit under that. When you get something out of a shopping cart, for instance, you just slide it over in there, and then when you get to where you're going, you slide it out. So that's one of the big reasons I think seniors really do like SUVs. Seniors tell me that they feel more vulnerable at a dealership. I can certainly understand that. You think about all the different things and what a big decision buying a car is. If you don't want to burden your family and you don't have the cash to pay, you've got to finance it. Those are all things to think about. Some other considerations that you need to really look at is safety. That should be number one. Cars are safer today than they've ever been before, and in fact, there are no unsafe cars. There are levels of safety, though. But like I say on the radio show all the time, if you can tell me what kind of wreck you're going to have, I'll tell you which car is the safest, because some of them are better from side impact. Some of them are great for rollovers should that happen. Some of them are better for frontal collisions. Some of them are better for back collisions. But just know that today there are a lot of safety features on cars, and they have never been safer. There are some things that also help to keep you safe. A couple of them that I just love is the rear view camera, which is standard in all cars now. That's really helpful when you're backing up, so you don't have to turn around and wrench yourself to get back there. Blind spot monitoring. When you look in your rearview mirror on your side mirrors, either way, if there's a car in your blind spot, it'll warn you. Some cars will go so far as to make a noise, but the main thing is you don't have to turn completely around to look to your right to see if it's safe to change lanes. And then there's parking sensors today that are on the front bumpers and the back bumpers. If you get close to something, it's going to beep and it's going to warn you, and some cars will actually stop you, especially when you're going in reverse. When you're looking at a new car, you've got to look at comfort. I mean, it's like what I talked about with getting in and out of SUVs. It makes a big difference. You want to make sure that the seats fit you well, that the visibility, you're able to see the mirrors, and this is especially important for some people who are short in stature and also tall in stature. And you want to make sure that you've got a tilt steering wheel so you can see over that steering wheel instead of having to look through it. Again, pay close attention to getting in and out of a car. That's something that you want to practice. Now, there's a lot of technology in cars today, and something you've got to be careful of is not getting distracted. And that's kind of hard to do, especially when you've got a brand new car and you're not completely familiar with everything. So you want to make sure that you know your car very well before you leave a dealership. One thing I often suggest to people, because it can be overwhelming with all the gadgets that are in cars today, all the different safety features and ways to tune your radio and navigation systems and all the things that are on cars today, which are wonderful, but until you get to know them, you're going to be taking your eyes off the road, and that's a deadly mistake. You don't want to do that. So get all the knowledge that you can when you take delivery of your new car, but then there's going to be some things you're not sure about. Write those down when you safely can, because I want you to go back to the dealership after you've had the car for a couple of weeks and ask them specifically about those things that you really don't clearly understand. A car should become intuitive. You should be able to operate everything without taking your eyes off the road. So make sure you put yourself in that position. Now, I want to talk about car buying mistakes that people make, seniors and non-seniors that make the mistakes. First one is not trusting your gut. Oh, if you're in a car dealership and things just don't feel right, get out of there. If you're driving a car and it doesn't feel right, get out of there. Don't feel pressured. Use good car dealerships. Good car dealerships like the 5-Star family of dealerships here in Dallas-Fort Worth. They will not pressure you. They will take all the time that they need to make sure that you are completely happy. So trust your gut. That's a big one. Don't believe everything you read online. You can get online and find information today on Google and other places, especially the forums where people who own a certain type of car get on there and post things. There's no way to verify this information, my friends. So don't take it as gospel just because it's on the internet. There's so much crap on the internet that you can't believe, that's fabricated. There's no way to verify it. And I promise you this, I can go online right now and find something bad about every car that has ever been built. But remember this, the people who are super happy, they're not the ones posting things online. Only the people who've had a problem or don't like something post online. So you get a very skewed look at a car when you're looking online. Next thing is, don't rush the paperwork. You're signing a legal binding contract. That is a huge mistake some people make. They wait till they get home to look over their paperwork. But they're not worried about it because they think there's a 3-day rule that if you buy a car, you can take it back. Not true. Absolutely not true. Once you sign the papers and you roll your new car over the gate, it's your car, no matter what. Good dealer will take it back if there's an issue or if you're not sure, but a lot of dealers will not. And remember, this is a legal binding contract that you have signed. So pay particular attention to anything that's got a dollar amount associated with that to make sure that you know every penny and where it's going. Another mistake people make is not taking a good test drive. You should be behind the wheel of a car for 30 minutes, and that's going to tell you a whole lot. You need to drive it under different circumstances, drive it on residential streets, find a rough street to drive it on, and for goodness sakes, drive it out on the freeway. Make sure that you're completely comfortable. Make sure that it's easy for you to park. Those are the things that cause buyer's remorse. You also want to walk into a dealership knowing what your credit history is, and in particular your credit score. This can be a big deal. I tell people, call around to your bank or your credit union and get the best interest rate you can get. Then let the dealership have an opportunity to beat it or match it. They do this for a living. Many times they can beat the best rate that you've got. And of course, from the factories, they offer a lot of 0% financing. And I'll tell you, it doesn't get much better than 0% financing. And then you want to look at leasing, whether it's good for you or not. And I'm going to go over some of that, especially leasing for seniors here in just a few minutes. But I don't want to get off this test drive thing just yet, because it is so important that you know what you're buying and that you love your car. You should, for the price of cars today, you should absolutely love the car that you buy. So know your priorities. What's the most important thing to you? Is it power? Is it comfort? Is it safety? Is it where the cup holders are? I've seen people, that was a huge thing. Know what's important to you. When you get to the dealership and you go to take a test drive, you'll probably drive the car first before. Some people want the salesperson to drive first, but most of the times it'll be you. Make sure that you have a safe test drive. Set your mirrors. Make sure the steering wheel's where it's supposed to be. And make sure you ask any questions about the car before you leave the dealership. Again, don't rush that test drive. 30 minutes is the minimum. You're going to be at some dealerships that a salesperson's going to be impatient and probably not want you to drive that far. But that's a good sign that you're at the wrong dealership, and you don't. This is nothing that you want to rush. During high-speed driving, turn on the air conditioner and the radio. Turn off the air conditioner and the radio to check the noise levels. Some people, and I'm one of them, very sensitive to road noise, wind noise, and just overall interior quietness. Some cars are better than others, and that's why you need to pay close attention to that. You want to check the visibility, make sure you can see all around the car, and see how comfortable you are parking the car. Pull it in, back it in, do it both ways, parallel park it if it's at all possible. And then once you're finished with that test drive, ask your salesperson to give you a few minutes alone to reflect on that test drive. You don't want a salesperson talking in your ear when you get back to the dealership and you're trying to sit there and decide, is this the car for me? So ask yourself, how did it really feel to you? What did you not like? Something bother you about the car? Then you probably need to keep looking. Did it meet your requirements for safety and comfort and visibility and all those things? And can you see yourself driving this car for the next 5 years? You may not keep it that long, but plan on that and make sure that you know that for 5 years you're going to like this car pretty much every single time that you turn on the engine. And be sure and compare more than one car for your potential purchase. You don't want to rush this thing. You really don't. It's too big a decision. And don't let a bad salesperson ruin your experience. You're in control. You're the buyer. It's your money. You call the shots. And don't let anybody talk you out of that. Your test drive can be a lot of fun. Should be fun, as a matter of fact. But don't lessen the fact of how important it truly is. Now I want to talk about leasing for seniors because this is something that I have been recommended for a while now. Uh, a lot of people haven't leased before, but leasing today in the United States represents about 40% of the vehicles you see on the road, the newer ones. And there are advantages to leasing that you can look at. And let me just say, excuse me, leasing is not for everybody. In my case, I've got two cars in my driveway. One is leased, one is purchased. So you have to look at the facts. Uh, with a lease, you're going to get a lower monthly payment. And if you're not in a position to pay cash for your next car, that check you write every month for a car, a lease payment can be anywhere from 35 to 50% lower than making a purchase. But leasing also helps you keep your cash. So with a lease, typically you put very little down. I typically recommend tax title and license, but you don't even have to do that in most cases. And we all know, money in the bank isn't paying a lot today, not like the old days with CDs that were paying 7, 8, 9%. But still, it is nice to know that you've got all your cash available to you if you need it. And with leasing, it gives you a lot of options. Um, if you're at the end of the lease and you don't know what to do, your dealer can help you decide, or you can call my radio show and I'll help you decide. But typically, there is three things that can happen at the end of a lease. You can buy the car, and you know that amount the day that you start into the lease. So it's called the residual value. It's on your lease contract. That's the guaranteed amount that you can buy it for. So at the end of the lease, you want to find out what the car's worth and compare that to the residual. If there's equity, you get to keep it and you can use it on your next lease. If there's not equity and you owe more on the car than the residual value, you simply hand them the keys and walk away. And I think, to me, that's one of the beautiful parts of a lease, because if you do a 3-year lease, at the end of 3 years, you cannot be upside down on the car. Or by upside down, I mean you can't owe more on it than the value. And so that's good. You'll also enjoy lower out-of-pocket expenses. Usually a 3-year lease at 36,000 miles a year, or you can go up to 45,000 miles a year. Usually in that span of time, you haven't done any repairs to the car because it's under warranty. You haven't bought a set of tires. You haven't done a timing chain. There's just no maintenance cost. You've done a few oil changes and you put gas in it. And really, that's it. And I like to see people, if your first leasing experience is a good one, get on a cycle of leasing where you do it every 3 years. And that keeps you in a new car every 3 years. And the reason for that is the latest, greatest safety features. I mean, they change every year. They come out with more things to keep you safe when you're behind the wheel. So if you're trading every 3 years, you've got the absolute latest and greatest things that come out on cars. And then the last thing, and this is a little hard to talk about, but should something happen to you, a lease is going to be easier for your heirs than a purchase. If you go out and buy a car on a 5 or 6 year or longer note, which unfortunately I'm seeing more of today, and something happens to you, especially in the first few years, the amount that's owed against the car is going to be more than what the car is worth, unless you put a lot of money down. And that's going to put a burden on the people who are your heirs. So bear that in mind. A lease, because it's shorter term, a lease is going to be a lot easier for them to get out of and get the vehicle gone. And believe me when I tell you this, just because you're gone, that lender still wants their money and they can get it. And if the car goes back, they can actually go against your estate and sue them. Now, that doesn't happen a lot, but I have seen it. So be careful with that. Now, with some leases, it comes with credit life insurance. And that means that if something happens to you, the lease is paid off and they take the car back, no further liability. The next subject I want to approach Again, this one is a very difficult subject, but something that we all have to think about, myself included. When to give up your keys. And a lot of people just don't. I mean, the thought of that is way more than they can fathom, because your loss of keys is your loss of your independence. Better today because there's Uber and Lyft and places that'll drive you around at a pretty reasonable cost. But it's just always nice to know you've got your own car sitting out there, and if you want to go somewhere, you can. But there comes a time when we're all going to face the fact that we shouldn't be driving anymore. And oftentimes it's going to be up to one of our kids or a relative to be the one to tell you that. And I can promise you this, it's not going to be easy on them. In fact, it'll probably be harder on them than it is on you. It's the circle of life. When your kids were 16, you handed them the keys to a car, most likely, and it was their first car. You told them to go out there and you be careful. And then, 50 years down the road, they're coming to you to take your keys away. And it's a tough pill to swallow. I totally understand. But if you look at the numbers, in 2019, there were 44 million licensed drivers age 65 and older, and that's a 63% increase since 1999. The CDC also reports that in 2019, almost 7,700 older adults, those aged 65 and older, were killed in motor vehicle crashes, and more than 257 were treated in emergency departments for motor vehicle crashes. So it can be dangerous, but there are warning signs that you can look at to kind of self-assess and enlist the help of others to make sure that you're okay. And you just have to be honest with yourself. And it's not easy. You want to do a visual inspection of your vehicle. Look for dents and dings and damage to the wheels or hubcaps where you've hit curbs. And sometimes that damage is there and you didn't really even realize that it was. If it's a true accident, sure, of course, you're going to know that. But if you scrape a curb or you bump something, sometimes you just don't feel it. Also inspect the area where you park at home or wherever you park. Look for damage to fences, garages, or a carport just to see if they've actually been run into. And then when you have somebody ride with you, have them observe you. This is a great job for one of your children or just a friend, but I think your kids will probably take a more vested interest. Have them look at your reaction times to traffic devices, for instance. Have them watch your motoring skills, like not being able to turn around and change lanes, or pay attention to how easily you take your foot off the brake and get it onto the accelerator and vice versa. And have them watch to make sure that you're staying within the speed limit signs. That's a big thing. You don't want to go too fast, and you doggone sure don't want to go too slow these days because you'll get run over. While somebody's in the car with you, have them watch to see if you're signaling your intentions. People aren't so great today at using blinkers, but it's something you should do to let others know what you're going to do, and that could cut down on the number of accidents. And more scary than that, road rage, which is a huge factor today. And finally, whoever's riding with you, have them look for frustration or confusion on your part, because this is also often a sign that you probably shouldn't be driving, but you hate to admit it. Other things you can do to make sure you're still safe behind the wheel: make sure you're getting yearly eye exams. Vision when driving a car is critical. There's too many things that can happen as our eyesight begins to fail. Sometimes it's due to age, and sometimes it's just you need a new prescription for your glasses. But whatever the case is, make sure that you can see the road ahead, see around you, see that kid that's crossing the street in front of you. God forbid we'd want anything like that to happen. Watch your overall health. Daily exercise, of course, in short durations, will help with your motor skills. It'll help you hit that brake quicker. Working crossword puzzle and keeping your mind sharp. That's a big deal. And then, of course, you got to get plenty of sleep. Driver fatigue is something that has become a huge threat on our roads today. The numbers, especially with young people, where they're staying up too late at night or they're studying or whatever they're doing. Fatigue can it has no bounds of age. It can happen to anybody. So make sure that you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you got that right vehicle. Let's go back to that test drive for just a second. Make sure that you're behind the wheel of a car that has got the latest safety features, things that will help you be safer. And then be cognizant of things that you're having trouble with to avoid any bad situations. I personally have trouble with really bright sunlight, and that's something that you want to watch. And then the opposite is true for many people. They don't see well at night. So when you have either one of those kinds of impairments, then change your routes to avoid those times. We know the times the sun's the brightest and in our eyes. Don't drive during those times if you can at all help it. And then, as always, if you can avoid getting out on slick roads or inclement weather of any kind, do that. Plan ahead any trips you're taking, even to the grocery store or to the mall. I mean, if you can, try to go in non-peak times and avoid the traffic, because traffic, especially in larger cities today, very aggressive. They're all speeding, they're all in a rush, and they will run over you. Trust me. And then talk to your doctor about your medications. Is there any medication that you take that could cause drowsiness or cause you to get dizzy? If so, don't get behind the wheel after you take that medication, and be sure that you eat. And I know it goes without saying, but whether you're a senior or whether you're a senior in high school, obviously don't drink and drive. If you've got any doubts about whether you should still be driving or not, there are driver assessment programs out there that will gauge whether you are capable of driving or not. And again, I know this isn't easy, and I dread the day that I have to give up my keys. But if we live long enough, that day is going to come. So you can contact AAA or AARP. They have programs to test you to see if you are capable of driving still and if you should be behind the wheel. And I tell you, no matter what, it's a good idea to get a independent third party recommendation. Sometimes our family's going to tell us things that is really simple and really easy. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to be honest with us because it's painful. A third party can be a real lifesaver for you, and I mean that. And don't forget, too, that we are prone to, when we start getting older, we're prone to gradual things happening. And that means that if we're not, if we should not be behind the wheel, that it happens over such a long period of time that you may not notice it. And that's why you need to do the things that I've talked about. Get somebody to ride with you and monitor you. It doesn't have to take very long, but they'll know pretty quick, if you're a safe driver and if you should still be driving. And then take a hard look at that third party recommendation from places like AAA and AARP that would give you 100% unbiased information and opinions on that. I've enjoyed being with you. I hope I've helped you. Remember my website, it's carprousa.com. You'll find reviews. You'll find a lot of things I talked about today. I've got an FAQ page there that covers all sorts of topics, and I have a senior section there. Also have sections on insurance, shopping for insurance, what to do if you're in a wreck, car buying advice on being inside dealerships. It's important that if you're going to go out and get yourself a car, that you use a really good dealership. like the one we talked about, like the 5 Star Ford family of dealerships. I've got some of the best names in Dallas Fort Worth at my website as recommended dealers that will take care of you. And they'll give you a special pricing. And main thing is they'll be honest with you and they'll be patient with you. So if you've got any questions, you can email me from carprousa.com right there on the front page, and I would be happy to get back with you and answer any questions or any comments that you might have. Again, my name's Jerry Reynolds. I'm known as the Car Pro, and it's truly been nice to be a part of the Empowering Seniors program. I wish you the best.